the people that have come from the people function that can lead an organization, they're also leading the people in an organization and finding a way to understand and facilitate, okay, both what generates great revenue, what are going to be the key elements that lead the company forward, but and also how do we create the environment for people to thrive.
Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the fantastic Salma De Graaff. Salma is the CHRO, or Chief People Officer, of Skyscanner. She's had a wonderfully rich career spanning a number of global organizations, and she's lived and worked in many different countries, getting to know a lot of different cultures. Welcome to the show, Salma.
Thanks, Leila. What an introduction. Love it. And it's lovely to be here. Thanks.
Well, very well deserved, frankly. Tell us a little bit about you for our listeners that perhaps don't know you or haven't seen you in action, in person, on stage, as you were last time I saw you. So tell us a little bit about the career journey and how you came to be in the role at Skyscanner.
Oh, okay. Let's have a look. Let's have a think. So the typical way I introduce myself is that you can tell by the sound of my voice that I'm English. If you could see me, you can tell by the color of my skin that I'm mixed race. So my mother is English, and my father was born in India but raised in Pakistan. And you could tell by my name that I picked up a Dutch husband on my travels. And it's, you know, my father was an immigrant into Britain in the 60s. I think he was actually heading for America, but landed in the UK and found his way to Birmingham. And that's where I'm born and bred, in Sutton Coldfield, if you know it, just in the Midlands. I'm the youngest of three children, two older brothers who teased the absolute crap out of me. Still haven't quite forgiven them. I do love them. But luckily we live very far apart, so I don't have to address that topic. And, you know, I think it's funny when you grow up in an immigrant Asian family, the pressure of education is really strongly there, or it was for me and my family anyway. There's a real push to show that you can be your best self, to work really hard. So education and schooling was really ingrained on me as a way to continue to improve yourself. So I remember I didn't pass my 11 plus to get into girls' grammar school. I think I cried my eyes out for a year, and luckily passed my 12 plus. So went to girls' grammar school and then went on to do a maths degree. How typical. Combined that with English literature and left to do chartered accounting. I mean, you couldn't write a more typical story if you tried, but I hated it, genuinely hated it, but loved the sales part. As a chartered accountant, you also have to sell the services of the accountancy, and loved that. And that's how I found my way into brewing. So ended up doing sales and then spent about 7 years, was really good at that. Found my way into sales training, and from there made the leap across to HR and continued to pursue then education, because the sort of function of human resources in the UK is also another chartered profession. I feel like there's a theme coming on. So then did my CIPD and my master's in HR. And education in that sense has always been a comfortable backstop. If I feel like I'm uncomfortable in somewhere, to go and read or research has proved me well. But then alongside that, I was given excellent opportunities. So I started then with Heineken, who encouraged me to go abroad. So I was about 30 when they asked me to go abroad to the Netherlands for the first time. And what a leap of faith. I really didn't want to go. I had no reason to leave the UK. I was like, why would you go abroad? And And honestly, I can't believe that I wasn't encouraged to do it sooner in life, like either at university for a stint away. I mean, it gave me so much, including my husband, my child, but it gave me so much to open my eyes to realize how privileged actually I was, both for being English native speaking, how that is a center of a lot of language capabilities, but also it gave me the feeling to really appreciate how other people live and what they have and how their experiences are and what an interconnected world this is. And then from there, I went on to Suriname. It's a little country in South America, Dutch speaking country. So utilized some Dutch speaking skills, which I tried to pick up along the way. And then we were posted in Kinshasa in the Dominican Republic, Congo, which after learning French for 2 weeks, and look at me planning on going to work in a French speaking country after 2 weeks of French, we didn't make it because we discovered we were pregnant. And so I came back to the Netherlands to have my baby girl. And then we went off to Ethiopia for 2 years. And Ethiopia, if you've ever been to Addis Ababa, just what a modern city, high up. It's one of the 5th highest capital cities in the world, and a really wonderful experience. Made some friends for life there, and spent 2 years there before coming back to the Netherlands. And now I'm working for Skyscanner, which is a UK-based company. So I spend about 2 days a week in London or Edinburgh or Glasgow. That's a whistle-stop tour. I feel like it's been more about my location than perhaps my experience, but hopefully that was okay, Leila.
Salma, that was one hell of a whistle-stop tour. And what's so wonderful and lovely about it is there is, of course, in the world of diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, culture, some of these kind of stereotypical, of the Asian family types, yet you then moved into finance and commercial and into kind of the people world. And I truly, I'm not just saying this because we're on the podcast, but some of the very, very best CHROs that I have met have been ones that have got a really strong understanding of the commercial lens. And in specific, within such a fast-paced, modern digital world that we live in, having that real fast-paced sales commercial edge has really been what has kept organizations at the forefront. And looking at the kind of the economic situation that we're in at present, it's not only people are at the heart of the best business focused strategies, but also strong commercial understanding to be able to move exceptionally quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, I think one of the things that I hope I bring to the role is, like I mentioned, having the opportunity to move so much. And perhaps I was also brought up as a Muslim. I perhaps didn't mention that. It's also been, I don't identify as a Muslim anymore. Is that the phrase? I had a very estranged relationship with my father in my later years, and that impacted my relationship with religions and how I feel about faith. But that's perhaps extremely personal. But I think when you go through those type of outsider struggle situations and you keep putting yourself into other people's shoes, it just makes you more empathetic and hopefully kind as a leader. And it's been very rare in my journey to meet kind HR leaders. Something about the role seems to believe that to have your voice at the table needs to be a very strong and firm voice, which it does, but not a mean place. And that's an unusual maybe comment to say, but also hopefully relatable in terms of when you meet strength, is it also kind in its appearance.
I think it's a really interesting and also positively controversial thing to say. And I really get that. And it is, without going down a complete rabbit hole here, but it is the classic argument of, does diversity and inclusion fall within the people function? And I get asked this question all the time. And I say it depends on the organization, which sometimes is a really frustrating answer for people to hear.
Yeah.
But if diversity and inclusion and culture and intersectionality, which you mentioned before, if all of those things fit into an HR function of which HR is known to be, or has a reputation to be, purely there to protect the business and protect the business only, I'm not saying it's not about not protecting the business anyway, you see what I'm saying, then there's a massive disconnect between the two. Is not always the case. Clearly, in the case of yourself and the work that you do at Skyscanner, and I dare say because of your background not being old school HR, quote unquote. Again, please don't write me negative emails, anyone who's listening to this. Oh my goodness, I'm not old school HR. But there is, with the function, it never used to have a seat at the table. Did it? Going back 10 odd years ago, didn't have a seat at the table, so it almost had to fight its way up there. Arguably now, the role of the diversity officer also should have that massive influence. And so how do we bring those together in a way that you've described that allows HR not to be the, oh God, you're speaking to HR situation?
I never saw myself in this job. I always wanted it. And there's funny, one of my own mentors and somebody who is a CHRO to me is a lady called Yvette Alcock. And she's a learning and development professional that has been with me on and off throughout my career. And she would say, the first time she met me, she recalled, I would say I wanted to be HR director. But I was young then, and I just wanted it, but I never, ever imagined I would get there. Like, it just didn't seem like a realistic possibility, neither from the type of people that were there leading those positions. And also my experience has been that many of the chief HR or the HR directors in those days had come from outside of the function. So had come from another function, and it had been a stepping stone towards retirement. So I'd never imagined how you got yourself into that position of being a HR director or chief HR as it is nowadays. So
Salma, where was the inflection point? Because this is such a great conversation, and I'm finding myself leaning into the screen now, very Sheryl Sandberg-esque of leaning in. But where was this inflection point for you when you thought, you know what, that is what I want to be, despite the fact that there are individuals around me who are, looking at this as an end of career gig, or have never deviated outside the realms of, we'll call it old school HR.
Yeah, I'd love to take some credit for having an aha moment, but I almost did the exact opposite. So when I left brewing, then I decided for a real career change, an industry change. So I joined what I thought was tech. It's travel tech, actually, that I'm in. But in my head, I was like, what's all this tech business? Let's get involved in that. Sounds ridiculous saying it out loud now. But so went and joined there, and really was like, okay, what value can I be here? And there it was my boss and the CEO, a guy called Remco Verhul was my boss, and John Mangala was my CEO. And they were encouraging me, and I was like, no, so not for me. I'm a wonderful number two. If you ever need a number two, I'm your girl. And I'm not capable of doing the number one position. And so they very sneakily said, would you have a coach? And that would be the coaching question, as to what would the chief HR role bring you. I was like, sure, if you want it, I'm not going to do it, but and with their encouragement and with a coach, showing me what I could bring to the role. That was the inflection point, and then I've not looked back. I've absolutely loved it. But yeah, I can't say that it was my self-belief. I would love to say that I had a moment where I realized, and my own self-confidence and my self-belief pushed me forward. But that wasn't my story.
Let's unpick that self-belief just for a moment. And because it's fresh in my head, I had breakfast with her earlier this week, but a good friend of mine, someone I admire massively, who is CPO for a big organization, is just moving into an interim managing director role. I was so pleased for her, so pleased for her. And she said to me, oh, you know, can I do it really? I was like, what is the thing that we have around self-belief? And whilst we've been talking a lot about the commercial nature of some of the greatest CHROs and CPOs that we know, I've started to see a number of them move into CEO roles even. You know, Tesco over in Ireland have done it. A number of the HR function, individual CHROs, CPOs, whatever we decide to call that, have taken on these MD type CEO roles. And I can't think of a time 10 years ago when that would have been the case.
Yeah. No, totally.
I question in there, I promise.
No, there's so many questions in there. I think also the navigating, we were talking about it in my team, the world of sort of managing the business is complex, and not only about steering a ship towards profitability and with a sense of purpose for what is it that we're going to deliver, whether that's for shareholder value or for the employees when you're more private limited company. But in terms of engaging, you also have to engage and retain and keep the people that are working for you, and the war for talent is real. The type of questions that come inside the organization now, where people found community externally, whether that was through their churches, through their political leaders, you can see that there's a sort of forming mistrust of where do we get both our information and our guidance. And they almost look towards their company leaders to share that, which is very tricky because, you know, it's certainly not my place to tell you what to believe in or what to trust. But you can see there's a growing sense of feeling that my company is also my community, and employees make community spaces inside, whether that's LGBTQ+ communities, women, support group community, all sorts of, you know, parenting communities. There's so much of that inside. So I think in that sense, the people that have come from the people function that can lead an organization, they're also leading the people in an organization and finding a way to understand and facilitate, okay, both what generates great revenue, what are going to be the key elements that lead the company forward, and also how do we create the environment for people to thrive. So I can see, you know, where that would be. The self-belief is a much harder one. You know, unpicking why don't you have self-confidence, it probably stems towards some sort of childhood way of either where do I get my reinforcement. And I think there was a question about being asked around what would you tell your younger self, like what advice would you give your younger self? And it's funny because when I first came into the workforce, I found it extremely emotional, like either getting good feedback or negative feedback almost felt parental, you know. And I can remember, I feel bad for my managers, you know, I would pretty much cry at every NGO review, mostly because they would be saying really nice stuff, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, somebody thinks so wonderful. But then I think, crikey, what a way to not be able to separate that feedback that is about work and not about me as a human. And if I could go back, I would really try to have understood that receiving feedback about your work is something so to be encouraged. And now I literally thrive on it if I receive it, and constantly trying to ask for it, begging people to share their innermost thoughts about my work. But in those early days, I found that extremely difficult to disconnect myself as a person and my work, and that's debilitating. It really is difficult. So if education, places of schooling can help you navigate emotions, to understand when it's about the work and when it's about the person, that would really help. That would have helped me in my early career.
Oh my goodness, there's so many things there that you said that I was just, in my mind, I was thinking, yes, this resonates so much. And I think for anyone who's listening to this podcast, there's some absolute nuggets of real wisdom in there. And it's interesting, you have this amazing kind of capability to be vulnerable and self-aware, yet also powerful at the same time. And you talked about the debilitating nature of this, this disconnect between the person and the business. And honestly, I still struggle with this hugely. And I wonder to myself often, will it ever go away? And again, I'll say something here which is rather controversial. I'm sure I'll have some mails about it, but I'm not entirely sure whether I believe in work-life balance.
No.
But then I don't know sometimes whether this is a product of running and growing and scaling a business whilst you have often, little monkeys on your back, or you have this kind of still desperate feeling of imposter syndrome, etc. However, the only way to go is to keep on going. And so where does the line stop between business and personal? I still think that is something that it's a struggle. And I even worry about it sometimes for the younger generations. You reference that early intervention within, say, the schooling and education system. There was certainly no talk around mental health and other things at this time when I was at school, when you were at school. I'm guessing, I'm presuming here. And you do realize the impact of the early years on the way that you are to this day.
100%, 100%. Like, it's like the skills that I wish that I had learned, because like people talk about resilience, be resilient. And what is that? And for me, the simplest form to understand what resilience is having a strong foundation. And what do I mean by that? That you get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, that you have a good, healthy diet, that you find time to exercise every day, and that you enjoy the activities that you're doing whilst you're awake that aren't sleeping. And for most people, that's working. But for others, that can be whatever activities you're involved in. And that day in, day out, rinse, repeat, do it again. Day in, day out, rinse, repeat, good food, good rest, good activities, exercise. And those sort of fundamentals, when you have that, then you can add on the pressures of work, and people can put heavy things on that foundation and you won't break. But teaching that, I feel like that has all had to be self-taught, mostly post 30. And as I turned 40, I realized I want to be really strong for my 50s, and did a lot of research about what does that mean. It turns out it's those 4 things. Who knew? And it's, but it is also this, when we talk about resilience, it turns out really we're talking about that. And then when I think about work, and a boss really also helped me that, it's like, get up in the morning and It's not about stress. Don't internalize the work pressures. Instead, have the mental attitude of, come on, what complex problems have you got for me today? And if you look at it that way, you know, what is the worst that can happen? You know, I'm not a surgeon. So, you know, what's the worst that can happen in my world? But bring it on. Bring it on. What's the complex problem today for me to solve? And I love me a complex problem. So then I'm up for it. But it is the rinse and repeat of, I'm able to do that because I have good sleep, good nutritionist diet, exercise, and I'm busy in my days. And so it is more a work, life balance rather than a work-life balance.
Really good points there. And it's the basis, it's the foundation, it is how you flip that narrative, ultimately, as you said, and your clients have said. So I think it's easy to fall into that kind of, you know, that Cartman drama triangle of, you know, are you rescuing? Are you persecuting? Are you the victim? Actually look inside. And it reminds me of that quote, put your oxygen mask on before you put others on.
Yeah.
With that inner strength, you can ultimately, as you so well articulated it, you know, you can pile lots of things on. Then at that point, one of our board members recently said to me, Leila, if you have health, you can do anything. So for goodness sake, slow down. And it really stuck with me. I thought, goodness, you kind of forget because you're always thinking, oh, what's next up the mountain. Hang on a moment, you know, get the health pack on first, as you said, because it gives you the benefit of being able to carry the heavy loads.
And where do we learn that earlier? So not at 40. Where could I have learned that at 20 to help? You know, like I said, it's also not that I'm afraid of my emotions and worried about crying at work. It's just I didn't want to be crying in my performance review. That, you know, so there's a time and a place for it. How do you learn to find your resilience earlier in life and that mental framework? That's what I would have loved and somebody to have supported me with.
Salma, I could literally talk to you for another whole podcast, and I'm conscious of how busy you are. I'd love to ask one little last question, if I may. We'll call it the lightning round question here. And you very kindly answered the question about your younger self, which I think is just superb. Pearls of wisdom there for anyone, no matter whether you are starting out in your career, whether you are in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on. Resilience and self-awareness and feedback are all critical pieces of that jigsaw. But I wonder, throughout the career, because you mentioned there's been some real key people in your business and or personal life, who is your biggest hero, your shiro, someone that's really been a beacon for you within the world of work?
It's tricky, isn't it? Oh God, my mom is probably my biggest motivation in terms of, you know, she worked full time till the day she retired, instilled that sense of independence into me and kindness. And like I say, sort of lead with kindness. And then from a business perspective, those people that I referenced, and there are more. I can think of Usha, Kakari Akayo, Michael O'Hare, Jim Park. There's people in my life, and what probably unites them is, for me, it landed that they led with kindness. And those are the people that stand out like shiny beacons in my personal and professional life.
Well, Salma, that is such a lovely note to end things on. And kindness is, it sounds so simple, yet if everyone did it, there would be such a big difference in the world of business, world of personal life. And on a more serious note, I think emotional intelligence is one of the rarest, actually, That sounds terribly negative, doesn't it? I don't want to say it's one of the rarest qualities, but it is one of the qualities that I see in some of the leaders that really are incredibly successful at what they do. Because where we are right now in this kind of ever-changing world of work, having that high emotional intelligence is not something that can be emulated through any other means.
Yeah.
Perhaps we've got Alexas and goodness knows what apps and things like that, but it's
Yeah.
something that you can really only feel and experience. And so it's testament to leaders like yourself who have great emotional intelligence, kindness, but also that very unique vulnerability that I think is really hard for a lot of leaders with the modern pressures to actually sometimes articulate as well as you have. So Salma, thank you ever so much, and some exceptional learnings there. I normally do a summary at the end and I'm like, where do I start? I think from intersectionality that you've mentioned, the importance of multiculturalism, how key it is if you're starting in the career or later in the career to get experience working in another country. I honestly really wish that I had done that. My husband did, and I often ask him about it, but it was one of the things that taught him the very most. But then also having the mixed heritage as well, and really understanding the nuances of different cultures and how they can be leveraged to build greater communities, to drive more engagement within the organization, whether it be employee resource groups, business resource groups. We're seeing such an uptick in this, not only from a community engagement, employee engagement perspective, but also as we have more interest from external stakeholders, from shareholders who want to see more social aspects within the ESG continuum. So in summary, Salma, I have done my best, but so many rich learnings from the podcast. You've been an absolutely super guest. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Leila, for having me.
My name is Leila McKenzie-Delis. I'm the founder and CEO of Dahl Global. You've been joined by Salma De Graaff. If you've been affected by any of today's issues, make sure that you reach out. We will make sure that we put the show notes in at the end of the show, along with all of the key learning points. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast apps, or visit us directly at www.dahlglobal.org/podcast. Take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you very soon.